All right, here we go with the 2007 offseason. We're starting off here with the retirements that we'll flip through. You can see Kyle Brady retiring from Tampa Bay, Kevin Mawe from the Chargers. Priest Holmes, a big retirement there for Dallas, especially when Steven Jackson got injured. We'll continue cycling through here. Wayne Corbett, Frank Wycheck, Junior So, major part of that Panthers defense when they were the number one team. We see Isaac Bruce and Mike Vanderjagt retiring, Matt Stover, Engram, Walter Jones. And there we go. So that's all the retirements. Now, as for the coaching changes, there's only 3 this year. Bill Cowher gets fired from Cleveland, which makes really a whole lot of sense. He didn't have a season with more than 6 wins. And they decide to hire Coach Eric Mangini, who was the defensive coordinator of the Carolina Panthers. Now, this was a top-tier defense, largely due to the talent on that defense, arguably the most talented defense in the league. But of course, in real life, right, when you see a defensive coordinator having such a solid defense, no matter who's on that defense, he got that highlight. He was on the team, the number one team in the NFC. So naturally, he was a top-tier coaching candidate, and he ended up going to the Cleveland Browns. As for the Baltimore Ravens, the Ravens' season started to decline, right? They went from being a playoff contender with a 13-3 record, 8-8 record, 11-5 record, but then they went 8-9, where they missed the playoffs, and then this year they had the worst record in the league, and it was time to move on from Brian Billick. And that's where, when I was looking at different candidates, I thought, oh, Jim Schwartz with the Tennessee Titans is a great option. He was at the time, and he also had a solid defense in Tennessee. Since Baltimore is much more of a defensive team in my mindset of Baltimore, I figured keeping Jim Schwartz as a defensive style team was the right choice for Baltimore. So Jim Schwartz there gets the job there in Baltimore. And then the other surprising one might technically be John Gruden leaving the Buccaneers to be replaced by Ron Rivera, who was the Pittsburgh Steelers defensive coordinator, and he kind of bounced around a little bit too. But when we look at the Buccaneers, John Gruden never won the Super Bowl back in 2002. So there wasn't really much that kept him being a prominent head coach other than making the playoffs 2 out of the last 5 seasons, which isn't great, right? He was 9-7 in his first season, making the playoffs, winning the division. Then he was 9-8 in 2005, 2006. But since then, I mean, he got 8-game win, a 7-game win, a 6-season game. And I figured it was time to move on there in Tampa Bay. And with the success of the Pittsburgh Steelers and the type of caliber coach Ron Rivera is, I decided that the Buccaneers would be a good landing spot for him. So sorry, Carolina fans. He starts his career in this reality with the Buccaneers. As you look at some of the history of the coaching staffs here, I do have the coaching staffs all the way for each position, but I'm just going to highlight the coordinators. So again, George Kokinis now becomes the general manager of the Cleveland Browns. We got Eric Mangini as a coach, Jeff Davidson as offensive coordinator, and Mike, I don't even know his last name, Trigovac. He was one of the Carolina Panthers positional coaches, and so Eric Mangini brings him along to be the defensive coordinator here in Cleveland. As for Baltimore, I mean, you're never going to replace Ozzie Newsome as GM, but Jim Schwartz then brings in Mike Shepard and Mike Tomlin, the 2 Mikes, to be his coordinators. Mike Tomlin needing that chance to be a coordinator. He was with Tampa Bay as their defensive backs coach, and I kept wanting to find a way to get him a coordinator position, but never was able to do it. Just forgot about or missed him. But now he's a coordinator in Baltimore and will likely have that stepping stone to becoming a head coach very shortly, as he's deserved. As for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they're keeping their Rich McKay as their general manager as they transition with Ron Rivera. We see Chan Gailey and then Mike Nolan, who was the defensive coordinator in Baltimore, join this Tampa Bay defense. Are you ready for free agency? Well, we start out here with Kurt Warner, one of the top free agent options, signing with the Oakland Raiders. Now, this was a surprising pick. Now, just like about 5 years ago, the Raiders were the team that disbanded, right? They lost Gannon, they lost Garner, they lost Tim Brown, they lost Woodson, their defense, everybody just left. Well, that's kind of what happened in St. Louis. Warner wanted to leave. We had Torrey Holt wanting to leave. Isaac Bruce retired. Even Marshall Faulk wanted to leave. And so a lot of Rams players are now available here in free agency. And a lot of teams went for him. The Cleveland Browns wanted Kurt Warner. The Panthers wanted Kurt Warner. The Buccaneers wanted Kurt Warner. The Chicago Bears wanted Kurt Warner. But he decided to go to Oakland. And I think Oakland's going to be a unique spot for him. Oakland has had a different starting quarterback each and every season. I kind of felt I messed up here that I should have had Rich Gannon go to Oakland because he would have reunited with Dick Duran, who he did so well with in Chicago, and have that reuniting opportunity. But I had Warner apply. Speaking of Gannon, he ended up going to the Panthers, where he will either be a backup mentor to Jake Delhomme, or he may get a chance to start. I kind of looked at it as Jake Delhomme just may not be the type of quarterback that's going to win you a championship. Although he led the number one team in the NFC with the Panthers last year, you could argue that it was their defense and Larry Johnson. Whereas Rich Gannon, even though he is like 9 years older than Jake Delhomme, could be a much more viable contending quarterback option. So I decided to have Rich Gannon go to the Carolina Panthers here in this reality. I mean, just seeing some highlights from him. Chicago was really good for him. He was a stable quarterback for Chicago, but I kind of see the relationship deteriorate when Dick Duran was fired and they brought in Johnny Lynn, because Johnny Lynn was the Giants defensive coordinator, and there were a lot of just weird games for Chicago, bad games for Gannon, bad games for Chicago in general. They finished 8-9, but I figured it wasn't really, there needed to be some change. And so Gannon leaving Chicago for another team, and specifically Carolina, I think made sense. As for Jeff Garcia, he was the backup in Dallas last year. No highlights. He was with Washington the year before. The Cleveland Browns signed him where he will be able to go head-to-head with Charlie Fry and Bruce Gradkowski for the starting job in Cleveland, and I think Garcia has a good chance of winning that QB battle. Edgar and James, one of the running backs with the Indianapolis Colts, two-time Super Bowl champion, just wanted too much money, and the Colts couldn't bring him back. So the Buffalo Bills now get a top-tier running back to go up against that AFC East division. Marty Booker, the wide receiver for San Diego, did really well, but he's older now, and so he decided the Chargers didn't bring him back. They got Santonio Holmes. They've got other options, but Marty Booker now joins the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in that NFC South division to be more of a reliable receiver, a receiver that Tampa Bay has not really had. David Tyree, Kotchery, they never became the receiver they needed to be. Now here's a big one, big signing here. Donald Driver did not want to be in Green Bay, and neither did Amon Green. So I had a choice. Do I keep Driver or do I keep Green? And so I franchise tagged Green for the Packers because he was just too important of a running back. Whereas and then the backup running back would have been Maurice Claret, which he wasn't that great of a running back. But I have other options for wide receiver in Green Bay. From Derek Hagan, we had Ferguson was an option, and then they definitely were going to go draft somebody as well. So it's easier to replace a receiver right now, or at least how I saw it as, than a running back. So I franchise tagged Green, and we see Driver joining Eli Manning in Kansas City, giving Eli Manning a true number one receiver to pair with Marquise Colston. Then Kyle Bowler with the Buccaneers. He lost his starting job last year. He got injured, so Ryan Fitzpatrick took over for him. But now all of a sudden, Bowler kind of pushed out. So now he's going to San Francisco, which actually is a potential starting spot for him. Right now, Drew Brees is the quarterback there, and Drew Brees is like the fourth or fifth overall quarterback in the league, but he has not been able to come up with wins. So if something happens to Drew Brees, all of a sudden, Kyle Bowler might have a chance to start once again in this league. Worst case scenario, he is just the backup to Drew Brees in San Francisco, which is actually not that terrible of a landing spot for him. Bowler had some decent seasons, but Bowler can only do what Bowler can. And let's just say I had very low expectations for him. Next, we've got Curtis Martin leaving the Patriots. He fumbled over 5 times this year in some crucial situations. New England likes that veteran running back, but in this instance, He got older, and they wanted to move on. So here we have the Atlanta Falcons bringing him in. Yes, they have Marion Barber, but getting Curtis Martin on this Falcons team is going to give them a leg up on a lot of their competition. So especially in that NFC South. South has Larry Johnson. They got Deuce McAllister. Now all of a sudden they have Curtis Martin. Now, Marshall Faulk, again, as I said, the St. Louis Rams were dismantled, ended up going to the division rival San Francisco 49ers. So Frank Gore is a decent running back, but he's not the same Frank Gore as in real life. So they needed someone else to really booster that running back room. Jerome Bettis was not it, but Marshall Faulk could be. Now, Brandon Lloyd was with the Dallas Cowboys, signs with the Jacksonville Jaguars. They lost Tyrone Calico, so they replaced him. Then we have a two-time Super Bowl champion, Bobby Wade, with the Colts. He ended up signing with the New York Jets and just came down to cap space with the Colts. And when you win the Super Bowl 2 years, you can't keep all your players, especially a third and fourth, technically a fourth-string wide receiver, despite his performance. Bryant Johnson, a first-round pick for the Dolphins, leaving Miami for Green Bay. There's kind of another replacement there for the departing driver. Here we have Peerless Price leaving Buffalo for the Carolina Panthers to give them some more wide receiver depth to be going along with Steve Smith. And then Torrey Holt signs with the New England Patriots. As I said, another Ram gone. There were many teams that went for Holt. It was Holt and Driver who were the top receivers. The Patriots did try to sign both. They wanted Holt and Driver. Driver went to Kansas City, but Holt decided to go to New England because the Patriots have struggled having a top-tier wide receiver option. They have Deion Branch, but he's like a 70, 71 overall. He's good, but he's not that next-level tier. They also had Darrell Jackson they traded for from the Seattle Seahawks, but he wanted a bigger contract than I really wanted to give him. I didn't think he earned it. I think he's a bit older. And even though Torrey Holt is also old, Holt is significantly better than Darrell Jackson. So I figured that the Patriots would just let Jackson go and then bring in Torrey Holt. And Holt was no scrub. He was one of Warner's top receivers. And although the Patriots made a big trade, and I'll get to that at the end of this video, Holt is still going to be a reliable receiving target for the Patriots despite their mega trade addition. And there we have a few more highlights there, just showcasing this talented receiver's ability. Now we move into Justin Fargas. He was actually a decent power back for the Detroit Lions, but now he has decided to leave to go join the Tennessee Titans. The Lions still have Reggie Bush and Kevin Jones, so not much room for him. Now the Minnesota Vikings signed Darrell Jackson from the New England Patriots. More to come with the New England Patriots, Minnesota Vikings wide receiver drama, but there's a big reason why the Vikings signed Darrell Jackson to offset a huge loss that they face in this offseason. And yeah, Darrell Jackson did well with the Patriots. He was a good receiver, but the Patriots were peeved that they lost to the Houston Texans in the first round of the playoffs. They don't want that to happen again. Kerry Collins, another quarterback signing with the Chicago Bears, had a rough year in Oakland. He was supposed to be the quarterback for the next couple of years, kind of like where Cleveland he was 2 years. But now he's going to Chicago where they don't have any quarterback other than Reggie McNeil. But they might go about drafting someone coming up in this draft. Maybe they can land a Brady Quinn. They can't land Jamarcus Russell. They might get a Kevin Cobb. We'll see where they pick and who is available at what spot. But Collins is that insurance policy for the Bears to give them someone who can technically start. Now, Fred Jackson leaves Pittsburgh. He was a decent running back for them, but MJD made him definitely a backup, even a second or third stringer. Since the Rams lost Marshall Faulk, they get younger here with Fred Jackson, and I think he's a good addition for the NFC West team here. So we see Fred Jackson going with the St. Louis Rams. Good addition there. Pittsburgh is doing fine with running back, especially with MJD in this offseason. Dallas Clark leaves Minnesota for the Kansas City Chiefs. Clark was a fantastic tight end draft pick. But because of Randy Moss, because of Vincent Jackson, because of Caldwell, because of all these options, sometimes I feel like I underutilized Dallas Clark. Now going to Kansas City with Eli Manning, Dallas Clark is sitting pretty with these additions. or with this new addition with this team. So we see some highlights there. Clark, a very reliable tight end, one of the better ones in the league, now joining the AFC West, which is a powerhouse division. Last one I'm going to highlight here is Tyrone Calico. He's a speedy receiver. Was with the Jacksonville Jaguars the last few years, but with Roy Williams and Roby and other options, he kept getting pushed away to the fourth or even fifth option. I think here in Cleveland, he's going to give them more speed as a receiver, and that's just going to pay off so great for the Cleveland Browns, giving them that fast option. And now we'll get to the rest of the teams. Here we have the NFC West and the NFC North. This is the entire premise of all the free agency moves. Going to highlight a few interesting ones. So a few defensive moves. We see Rondé Barber, one of the top cornerbacks in the league with Tampa Bay, is now joining the Arizona Cardinals. We have London Fletcher joining the Arizona Cardinals. Seneca Wallace joins that QB room. It's Seneca Wallace, Brad Smith, and Michael Vick. But as many of you know, heading into 2007, Vick's going to be going to jail. And I wasn't planning a offseason to replace Vick because I really didn't want that to be an actual storyline until it actually did happen. So again, you're not going to replace Vick with another quarterback. He's a speedy quarterback. He can't seem to win games though, but he's a talent that you wouldn't replace with a real quarterback that is going to start. But Seneca Wallace I thought was a good backup coming from Chicago to kind of offer that depth at quarterback, and he might end up being the starter. The 49ers, they got Javon Kearse, probably the best pass rusher in the free agency class. They got Pete Kendall, some offensive line help. Now with the Rams, notice Tony Romo. He was the backup quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings these last 4 years, and instead of trading him to any certain team, I let him go into free agency. And with Kurt Warner being gone, Tony Romo may be that backup getting a chance to start with some other team, and that other team ends up being the St. Louis Rams. And if Romo's successful, he could enter this team and keep them in the playoffs like Kurt Warner did. Now, they will likely draft a quarterback, right? Whether it's probably more of a late round pick. I mean, we could look at a Drew Stanton, Kevin Kolb, John Beck, right? Someone in that tier, because then that gives Romo some challenge. Because again, like Matt Flynn and Russell Wilson, or you look at some of these backup quarterbacks getting a chance to start, but then they are normally challenged by another rookie or maybe even a quarterback battle. Al Harris joins the Rams. Sam Aiken joins the Rams. Seahawks add another one of the top cornerbacks in the league, Patrick Surtain. And there were a lot of good cornerbacks. So Surtain, Barber. We also see Seattle adding Sean Thompson, Joe Andruzzi, John Tate, Desmond Clark. So having some more additions there. Bears looking at Martin Rucker, Spencer Havner, Aeneas Williams, the championship cornerback with the Colts. Lions adding Samari Roll, another good cornerback in free agency, trying to improve there on their kicker with Wade Ritchie. Packers, only a couple additions there. They get their punter, Derek Frost from Pittsburgh. Then Willie McGinnis, a linebacker from the New England Patriots, an older veteran, just getting some more depth on their defense. Then the Vikings again, Darrell Jackson. We look at Darren Woodson, a solid safety there. Tony Hollins, Najee Davenport, getting more depth behind Ronnie Brown at running back. Greg Ellis, Jarvis Green, and some defensive ends and pass rushers. Now we move to the NFC South and the NFC East. And we see the Buccaneers adding Rodney Harrison from Pittsburgh. Mark Bulger was released from the Baltimore Ravens. And I don't have a clip for him, but he was signed by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Although he had a terrible season last year, and maybe he's blamed for the failure of Baltimore, he's still a solid quarterback. And so he is going to get another shot here in Tampa Bay. Now Ryan Fitzpatrick is still there, so I might have a quarterback battle between the quarterback last year and the new quarterback, Mark Bulger, but we'll see how that ends up. We see Falcons adding Curtis Martin, Mike Gandy. They get the best fullback, Ron Conrad, that was in free agency. Panthers adding Rich Gannon, still trying to figure out what to do with him. Antonio Pierce, another veteran to that defense. Peerless Price, Justin Gage coming from St. Louis. You have the Saints adding David Tyree, a division opponent that was a former Tampa Bay wide receiver. They add Corey Bradford, who was a Patriots receiver, and he was a Super Bowl champion with the Houston Texans. Then we see the Dallas Cowboys adding Aaron Brooks to be the backup for Vince Young. They add receiver Terry Glenn, and then Brian Smith there at middle linebacker. Eagles didn't re-sign anybody. They tried for Donald Driver. I think there was another position they went for, but they didn't get him, and they just didn't sign anybody else. Giants add a backup quarterback, Dave Ragone, and safety Jeremiah Bell. Then Redskins add former Browns and Steelers linebacker James Ferrier. Got some offensive line help majorly. Got Dan Neal, Marvell Smith, Langston Walker, and they got their punter there with Brad Maynard. Now moving to the AFC, we see the Denver Broncos with Sean Williams and Mike Goff and Brad Johnson. Brad Johnson there to back up Derek Anderson. I think he's like 37, 39, something like that. Not there to start, but there to maybe offer mentorship to Derek Anderson. We see the Chiefs adding probably the best kicker in the league, Adam Vinatieri, Donald Driver. We see Dallas Clark. Chargers, not really any big moves there. Jeremy Stevens, Austin King. Raiders, again, they have the big addition with Kurt Warner. They signed Jerome Bettis, who had a subpar year in San Francisco the year before. Rick D. Mulling as an lineman. Bengals, we have John Jensen, probably the best signing of their offseason, with getting that solid offensive tackle. And then William Green, the former Browns running back, joins the Bengals running back room. Browns just signed 2, Calico and Garcia. Ravens added Quincy Carter to add, because likely they'll be drafting Jamarcus Russell at quarterback since they got rid of their Mark Bulger. And so having Quincy Carter there as a mentor is a good move. And then the Steelers add Todd Weiner to add Victor Riley, some offensive line help. Derek Smith from the 49ers, a good, solid veteran linebacker. Losing Fred Jackson, they end up signing Deshaun Foster, who is probably more of an upgrade for that backup running back position. And then to finish off the rest of the free agency here, we have the Bills, again, getting Edgar and James. They got Sam Madison. Madison was the other Miami Dolphin cornerback. So in this plethora of cornerbacks here in the offseason, they got one of them. Dolphins end up getting Jason Gilded, some more depth in their linebacking core. Hugh Douglas and Will Joseph on the front. We see Matt Lepsies. They sign Joselio Hansen, not a big replacement for losing Surtain and Madison, but just somebody to add to that defensive back room. The Jets adding Eric Barton. They add Super Bowl champion from last year, Courtney Brown, who was with the Colts and was drafted by the Cleveland Browns. Dexter Jackson there in the backfield. Patriots add Joe Nedney, Chris Gardocki. They needed both punter and kicker. Again, Holt, they signed David Green, who was moderately successful with Seattle, and then he went to Washington to compete for the starting job. Started a few games, then was injured, then replaced by Chris Redmond, and never got his chance to go back. Well, now he is the backup in New England. Colts add Chris Brown at running back after losing Edgar and James. They do have Brian Calhoun at running back as well, and they also have Dominic Rhodes. Trent Green joins the Colts as a backup quarterback. They never had a really solid quarterback. They had Craig Krenzel, I think. And I just thought if they have a little bit of cap space now, that maybe they can add a backup quarterback. Let's get a real quarterback, because if Manning goes down, you still want to have a chance at the Super Bowl. And if Manning goes down, Trent Green is likely a good substitute. Jaguars get one of the better linebackers, Tekio Spikes from the Cincinnati Bengals, add some defensive back depth. They get receivers and Brandon Lord and Qasim Osgood. We see the Texans adding Sean Ellis, a good good defensive end there. Leonard Little. They get the former Super Bowl champion and Super Bowl MVP, J. Ryan Mersma. And Ryan Mersma has like 3 Super Bowl wins. He won with the Buffalo Bills and back in 2003. He won with the Colts. I'm trying to remember if he was on the team both years, but I know he definitely was on the team last year. So he has at least 2 Super Bowl championships. So he is now going to the Houston Texans. And then the Tennessee Titans add Lawyer Milloy. They get some depth there with quarterback with Mark Brunell, maybe more of a mentor to Phillip Rivers, Leroy Hill, and then they, of course, added Justin Fargas, as mentioned earlier. Now, as for the trades, Randy Moss did not want to return to the Minnesota Vikings. He could have landed in free agency, and I could have had a huge free agency battle over him. But I decided that it makes more sense for the Vikings to franchise tag him and then trade him. So I decided that the franchise tag was enough for the Vikings to get something for him, but he didn't want to be in Minnesota anymore. Maybe he didn't want to live in Dante Culpepper's shadow, since Culpepper keeps winning MVPs, and Moss may think, I think it's me that you're winning these MVPs. And they can't seem to get far enough in the playoffs. So Randy Moss wants out, and the team that answered the call was the New England Patriots, trading 2 first-round picks to 07 and 08 for Randy Moss. That might be a little too much, a little too little, depending on what you think. But when you're the number one wide receiver in the league, at least 2 first-round picks were good enough. Patriots were still on the move, making more trades. They ended up deciding to trade away their duo cornerbacks. They kept Champ Bailey, but they got rid of Law. And the reason for that is they had Andre Woolfolk, and I kind of wanted to keep him going. And so all of a sudden, Woolfolk is now going to be the second cornerback. This saves them like $20 million because Ty Law was a big re-signing. So they're keeping Champ Bailey, who's a big contract, but decided to get rid of Ty Law and a 6th-round pick. In doing so, they pick up a 2nd-round pick from Carolina. They get Michael Turner, the backup running back for the Panthers, who could be a starter, but was the backup to Larry Johnson. And then they get some more depth on their defense with middle linebacker Will Witherspoon. So the Patriots here get a defensive player, Michael Turner, and a 2nd-round pick, whereas the Panthers, who already have a premier defense, decide to add a cornerback, a top 10, top maybe 6th cornerback. He was like an 88 overall, one of the best in the league, to help their cornerback room because that was their weakest spot. They had like a 77 and a 78 overall. Now they get Ty Law, a top-tier cornerback, just to be more difficult to go up against. And then a simple trade there, you see J.P. Losman, a former first-round pick, after 4 years, just is pocket change, 6th-round pick. J.P. Losman is going to be backing up Aaron Rodgers in San Diego, while the Saints move forward with Drew Bledsoe. After last year, their record wasn't that great, but Bledsoe played well, so at least they can celebrate that.